So good evening, Miss Whelan, and good evening, all my young friends, Tsinghua students, and good morning for my young friends online from Chile, from Peru, from Brazil. Welcome, everyone. Actually, this is a combination of the class. For Tsinghua side, we have the combination of two courses. One is the course of exploring Latin American and the Caribbean countries. Okay, for the student of this course, actually last week I already mentioned, we're gonna have more focused topic delivered for the student, okay, rather than only general introduction of the Latin American countries. Poverty alleviation is absolutely one of the most important topics for Latin American Caribbean countries. So we choose it, okay? And also for the student, for the challenge program, as well as, the course of China, Latin American youth, responding to global challenges, 2025, the poverty alleviation challenge. For the student of this class, of this course, as well as the student for this program, just because later on, you're gonna choose your topic, you're gonna work on the solution of specific poverty alleviation issue. Now here, we're helping you to get better understanding of the poverty issue, poverty alleviation in the Latin American countries. Is that fine? Okay, right? All right. So regarding this, we have a set of lectures delivered to you on the topic of poverty alleviation. Okay. Today, we're gonna invite two outstanding speakers talking about this topic. And also on the May 8th, okay, in Chinese, 5月8号, okay, May 8th, we will invite another two outstanding guest speakers talking about the poverty issue, all right? More than that, in this challenge program, this year, we also promote the AI associated solution. It doesn't mean that, if you work on a poverty issue, you use another type of solution. Every type of solution are welcome. Is welcome, okay? But we want to take advantages of AI type of tool to help us to, find the appropriate solution for a certain poverty phenomena. All right. Regarding this, we have different kind of approach. One, we have couple of special topics related to the poverty alleviation. Okay, related to AI. So we will encourage you to choose from. That's one. And secondly, we're going to provide the lectures on AI so that you can master some of the knowledge of AI and try to use it towards the poverty alleviation. Okay. In fact, the first speaker today is actually the topic on the AI and poverty alleviation. Right. I will introduce our previous guest speaker later. That's the second way to promote AI solutions, all right? The third way is that actually we have distinguished professors who are experts on AI associated knowledge. They would like to help to provide advice to the team who choose this type of topic, all right? Yeah, and the fourth approach is that with the support of Tsinghua Xuetang X, which is an online education platform, they provide us several courses directly related to AI. So you can have the opportunity to online learning. You know, if you learn more, you can also have the certificate. But anyway, you have the opportunity to learn online, okay, regarding the AI associated knowledge, right? So all this information, I'm sorry, I should show you this, I'm sorry. The speaker today, I will explain, I will introduce her to you, and also with Xuetang X, and we have different courses here we're gonna share with you, and also we have different topics regarding AI helping the poverty alleviation, and we have all these professors, Professor Zhang, Professor Zhang, and more professors who are willing to help you to, to work on those solutions. Okay, we will definitely put this information on the website of Tsinghua Latin American Center. And also we're gonna directly share this information to our Latin American partners. Okay, so everyone can share these resources. All right, so I already have enough the introduction, and let me just come back to focus on today's lecture. So the first lecture gonna be delivered by Miss Wayland Canosa. I hope I pronounced your name in the right way. Okay. The Miss Wayland is the development economist and head of strategic partnership and the policy team at UNDP China. He has been collaborating with the office since 2018, first as a leading author of a study on global value chain in the palm oil sector, and then as a development advisor. And actually, Miss William has had a diverse career, combining an interest in both development and mainstream of economics. He used to work in a think tank in Europe and in some other important institutions. I want to list all the fantastic the career here to you. So thank you very much, Ms. Whelan, for joining us. So now the floor is yours. Okay, welcome.
Thank you very, very much, Professor. It's a pleasure being here. I assume you can hear me well and clear.
Very well, very well.
So thank you very much for the invitation, and apologies not being able to be there with you, which would be definitely much more interesting, and at least for me. But thank you very much for accommodating me being online. I will now share my screen. There you go. And also, I'm honored also to be on the same panel with many of very distinguished professors. Can you see the screen, the slide of human development and AI?
Yes. Yes, we can see your screen. Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah,
So yes, thank you very, very much. So as you said, my name is Viola Di Canossa. I'm here at UNDP China, and we very much look at both poverty and AI, particularly in the last most recent period, and working with a few of the professors that you listed in your presentation. So I may come back as a student, perhaps one of these days, and listening to them too. Today I will like to touch upon these two topics and splitting a bit between how at UNDP we look at poverty and rethinking poverty, and then connecting it with AI and the new digital innovation and transformation that we actually seeing. I assume you students all have quite a good understanding of poverty concept and AI, so I will scroll through the first set of slides fairly quickly, and then we can touch base on any questions, perhaps later on. So allow me to maybe touch on a few points around the SDGs and SDG 1. So the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal, represent an unprecedented global consensus, which I think is something that is worth reiterating nowadays. They are a result of 193 countries coming together in agreement on a comprehensive and ambitious development agenda for the people and the planet. They were launched in 2015 and with a target to 2030. They describe the greatest challenges and needs of our time and the goals to addressing them. And I think what is interesting and actually telling is how even in the Pact for the Future, which is basically the next iteration that was launched last year during the Summit of the Future in New York by the UN Secretary General, the SDGs are still very much central in the debate about what is sustainable development and what is the vision that we would like to have for our future. Achieving SDG 1, no poverty, is absolutely central. And I think these charts are quite telling about all the interlinkages and the co-benefits that exist across SDG 1 and the others. Out of the estimated 140 interlinkages, 100 are estimated with a positive impact, which means that SDG 1 contributes or benefits from other SDGs. And only 26 are actually defined as trade-off. Here, just starting on a positive tone, i.e. what has been the incredible progress on eradicating extreme poverty. Here, the two charts are about Brazil, Peru, China, and Chile. So the countries of the student in the room and online. And I hope I don't have to spend too much time here, but in any case, what is remarkable is the progress across the board on eradicating extreme poverty. To that, and being an economist, we have the other side. So we should not, if progress has been extraordinary, we should not lose sight of the big picture. So first of all, there is more to SDG 1 than extreme poverty. And we need to have a more comprehensive approach and broader vision regarding poverty and vulnerabilities, which are link that to the principle of leaving no one behind. So SDG 1 has different targets. Extreme poverty is one, but then we also touch upon poverty in all dimensions, equal rights to economic resources, building resilience, mobilizing resources, the importance of having a solid policy framework. So again, way more complex than just the extreme poverty monetary measures that are presented here in this slide. And this is my second point. There is no one size fits all. Poverty should be analyzed in relation to local context, conditions, and development. So extreme poverty is extremely important, but for the 4 countries we're looking at, for instance, and they're in the room today, this is not that relevant because development has moved forward. So according to the World Bank, we should a more adequate measure of poverty for upper middle income countries is the one at $6.85 per day rather than 2.15. And then the pictures does change, and it's a reminder that as development practitioners, as policymakers, we should always strive for moving the bar forward. And the third point I would like to make is that in this context, we also should go beyond pure monetary deprivation and look again at a more holistic approach. And this is how organizations like UNDP and others have come up with different indices, the MPI and the HDI. On the MPI, i.e. the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index, this is a measure designed to capture severe deprivation that people face at the same time. So this multidimensional type of deprivation and its intensity. And the 3 dimensions are health, education, and living standards. The good thing of having an MPI is that it allows for comparison across countries on a broader picture than simply a monetary policy, a monetary dimension deprivation, and offering a good complement to income-based poverty measures. Chart here, a snapshot of the indices, the multidimensional poverty index as produced by UNDP in last year's report. And maybe a caveat here, and quite an important one, which I think underline much of the work, at least that professors and us as economists, or again, development practitioners are doing: data. Chile, for instance, is not in these pictures because Chile produced its own national MPI index, but is not included in the global one because its national MPI uses a country-specific methodology and indicators, which are not harmonized in the global framework. So makes comparison difficult. Another fun fact, China, which is here, uses data from a longitudinal general social survey. The most recent survey that is used to calculate the MPI that was produced in 2024 is based on data that were collected in 2014. So a negative, or let's say not a space to improve on particular MPI on similar indices is the lack of data, particularly disaggregated data, timely data, and publicly available data. A bit to compensate for that, we have the Human Development Index, which differs from the MPI in as much as the MPI uses household data, while the HDI uses mostly national accounts data. So they're usually more timely available and uniformed across multiple countries. HDI, or Human Development Index, looks at the capabilities, taking an even more holistic approach to people, not only looking at a monetary dimension, again represented here as decent standard of living, but also health and education, very much similar to the MPI. Here, again, a snapshot of where we stand with the latest round of numbers, 2022 Human Development Index. These numbers were published in last year. The new Human Development Index will be published on the 6th of May, so we will have a bit of an update very soon. What I like personally of the HDI, that it actually evolved beyond this headline index and into looking at other composite index that try to go beyond income, beyond averages, and beyond today. So trying to include summary measures of inequality, and that's a set of indices that looks at also inequality adjusted indices, try to have a gender lens and a specific focus, and look at the future. And this is a planetary pressure adjusted human development index. And that covers very much the long-term sustainability dimension of human development. The Planetary Adjusted Human Development Index is an experimental index that was produced a couple of reports back, so 4 years ago. And working in China, for instance, is something that is extremely relevant to the local context. Given the focus that the government has on greening the economy, on moving towards a high quality development that is very much centered around innovation, but also environmental sustainability. And these are all very much then reflected in the government visions for a beautiful China, and or goals like the dual carbon goals, which have been announced in 2020 and look to reduce peak carbon emission by before 2030 and reach carbon neutrality before 2060. What is interesting is that across the board, the planetary adjusted index is always lower than the HDI, which means that basically when we trying to capture the pressure that human activity is and has inflicted to the planet, human development actually is lower. It depends where you are. And here, beside the Chile, China, Peru, and Brazil, we also put Qatar and Afghanistan, because these are the two countries at the end of the spectrum. Qatar is the country that records the largest loss in human development due to planetary pressures, and Afghanistan is the country that records the least smaller loss due to planetary pressure. Coming back to China, we have looked at the PHDI and went beyond the national averages. So we published last year a report that looked at the provincial PHDI trends in these countries. So giving a much more nuanced picture, particularly in a country as big as and diversified as the one where we are now. And the study reveals two trends that are not obvious, let's say, or may not be obviously at first. The first one is that while the traditional East-West gap in development status is very well known, when we are taking into account sustainability, this analysis reveals that a sharper north-south divide. So northern provinces face greater human development losses when the HDI is adjusted for sustainability, while southern provinces improve in the ranking. And this is a reflection of lower per capita emissions and material consumption. And this is reflected in the two maps that you find at the bottom of the slide. And the second trend that we found was growing regional imbalances when sustainability is included. So globally, and I guess quite intuitively, less developed regions or country typically exert lower per capita environmental pressures, and so result in a gap between the Human Development Index and the planetary adjusted one, which are smaller. China presents a unique case because there is no clear correlation between HDI-PHDI gap and the HDI level, as pictured in this chart on the left. The largest HDI and PHDI gaps are found in provinces with mid-range human development values. So this, in a way, shows that when we apply different lenses to development or to poverty, human development or poverty, the landscape actually changes and reveals new trends that are crucial for informed and effective policymaking. In this respect, developing welfare metrics, and again, my point to the data that I mentioned earlier, captures the interlinkages between human development and the environment, is one first critical step. Now, next is using these metrics to provide policy recommendation to strengthen and accelerate the integration of consideration of easing planetary pressures into development strategy for effective human sustainable development in the long term. So I hope until this point I didn't lose anyone and you're still there. Let me switch to the next topic, which is artificial intelligence. Sorry. So the new general purpose technology, what everybody's talking about. At least from where I sit, is quite interesting because either we talk about tariffs or we talk about AI at this moment in time. AI definitely can contribute to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and actually contribute to accelerate actions and progress. And considering how progress is being slow, this is a key and critical element. On the other hand, rapid changes are also raising major issues, concerns, and questions that are quite varied and complex. So today, I will more focus on the first aspect, so how AI can contribute to achieving and can contribute to the 2030 Agenda, rather than delve deeper on challenges and issues that have been raised at different level, internationally, nationally, and also I think locally. And to connect AI and human development. So human development is expanding choices. It's all about that. And AI can help or hinder choices. So this is how we're looking at artificial intelligence at UNDP and how artificial intelligence can be used for human development. The point here is to have AI application that shape and expand opportunities while at the same time reducing the risks. Not an easy job. Let me start at a very high level, perhaps. This is to highlight that, again, AI considerations are now taken into analysis across different level of UNDP, but I guess also countries. So the United Nations Secretary General launched a multi-stakeholder high-level advisory body on AI to undertake analysis and advance recommendation for the governance of AI. And I'm sure many of the professors that I've seen on that list will talk about that, because that's how is one of the key channels through which minimize the risks that AI application can have on people, planet, human development, and sustainability. And this maybe is for later question to you all. So please remember this, because I would be curious to hear your views and your perspective. On the right-hand side is a collection of words. These are keywords that were extracted from a specific question that was asked in a survey that was produced and published in the AI Risk Global Pulse Check, which is a report under this high-level advisory body. And the question was as following: are there specific individuals, groups, societies, economies, ecosystem that you are particularly concerned may be harmed by AI over the next 18 months? Respondent quoted Global South and marginalized community clearly pop up. I mean, the size of the font reflects number of respondents. You have children, you have women, you have youth, and you have many others. I would be very curious and interested in your perspective on, if you were asked the same questions, what would you pick? Would you agree with what has been mentioned here? Would you add or maybe prioritize differently groups, individuals, societies, and economies? So please, let's remember to come back to this one afterwards. Let me switch on now to a bit more practical. So UNDP as a practitioner, and how UNDP as the largest development agency in the UN system applies AI and support AI application across this program globally. When we were preparing with my colleague the presentation, it was quite striking, because we come to learn that basically in all the countries we operate, we are already using, and we have been using for a while, AI, digital AI supported solutions. And this spans across the whole world and across very different thematic areas. This is the list of the main existing AI applications that are either designed, financed, produced with government counterparts or by UNDP for specific stakeholders in different countries. And I mean, I hope you can see it, but the list is quite diverse. It goes from deforestation, agriculture, tourism, healthcare, mining sector, urban environment, social vulnerability, water, you name it. And what is also interesting, at least is that also organizations like UNDP are not only using AI as a tool to support sustainable, innovative, sustainable solution in partner countries and with partners, but we are also using it internally to make the organization more efficient and more able to respond effectively to the challenges and requests of partners. I have 3 slides that presents 3 different applications and how poverty reduction empowered by AI programs. Here with you. All this is public information, and you can actually Google it and find, or I can share also the links with more information if needed, because I also understand that you have a project, so some of that may be of interest. So the first one is basically how you support poverty reduction through economic diversification and a job creation. This example talks about a program in Tanzania. Tanzania is an economy that is heavily dependent on tourism. Tourism, I'm not sure this would be the case for any of your country, probably not, but Tanzania is quite dependent on tourism. 17% of GDP comes from tourism. And provides 1.6 million jobs, so it's quite a sector. It's also recognized as an untapped potential to contribute more. On the other hand, challenges include inadequate infrastructure, limited finance access, competition, wildlife poaching, or environmental degradation. UNDP collaborated with the government, the Zanzibar Commission for Tourism, to improve tourism using data-driven approach. And basically, through this AI-powered solution, the aim is to provide better and more accurate information to power the sector. So through the partnership, the partnership leverages AI and other technologies to understand the tourism industry better, to connect demand and supply of the services, to allow better informed decision making, also by the tourism stakeholders on the ground, which often are small businesses and informal businesses. Correct. So you also have this layer of how to support informal economies and how to lift it up through providing, again, as I said, through these solutions, better information and analysis. A second example is about Digital Social Vulnerability Index, again, for policy making mostly. This would be useful. This, on the bottom of the slide, there is a I mean, the link, you can't use it, but if you take a screenshot, there is the web address of the actual tool that you could use and play around. Here, the goal is to strengthen collective ability to assess and respond to social vulnerabilities using cutting-edge digital tools. The country is Tajikistan, which is also embracing quite a bit of moving ahead on digitalization as a core component of its long-term sustainable development goals and vision. And the results of this project was basically this high resolution and interactive map that allow us as practitioner, UNDP as a practitioner, but also the government and other interested stakeholders to visualize and analyze social vulnerabilities for greater accuracy and depth. The project also involved, it was quite extensive stakeholder engagement through through a series of trainings conducted for practitioners and researchers on the ground, and also development stakeholders and government officials focusing more on the utilization of this such index for decision making and strategic planning in the development sector. So another interesting aspect of this solution is that it's a pilot, but it's a public good because it's open. Again, it's absolutely open source, and so the idea here is to replicate it and in different contexts and in different countries. Third example is AI for inclusive digital finance, and again, is a way of utilizing data and technology that allows us to access and analyze these data and track them in real time, helping financial regulators better understand a consumer experience and detect issues like digital fraud. It builds on a rich and multilingual database, and that often is built from scratch. And through the use of advanced tools like machine learning and natural language processing, another important element of this project, the results are made accessible to a wide audience and possible users through chatbots and interactive dashboards for the regulators. Again, this is something that can be found online through the SDG AI Lab, that is a program based out of the Istanbul UNDP office. I am monitoring the time. I'm 30 minutes in. So maybe what I can do, and maybe then we can open the floor so it's less of a monologue. I will skim through the work that UNDP does around as a policy advisor, as a knowledge hub. And this centers around, at this moment in time, two main projects. One is a global human development report, which is UNDP flagship report, where the Human Development Index, it was firstly presented, and then it's published every year or 2 years. And then a specific Asia-Pacific project to which colleagues from, a professor from Tsinghua are very much also working with us on. So the next Global Human Development Report will be published on the 6th of May, and I strongly suggest you to keep an eye out for it, because I believe it will be very interesting and relevant, considering some of the point that Professor Chen earlier on mentioned on your course. It's titled Rethinking Human Development in the Age of AI. And it looks at how to harness AI potential, safeguarding the risks for human development against the backdrop of AI becoming a general purpose technology. It looks at human development through a life stage approach. So childhood, young age, basically you, adult, and older people. And for each of these stages, it analyzes how AI is impacting not only physical development, but also mental development. And this is something that the Human Development Reports in the last 1 or 2 editions are also trying to push out the boundaries. And again, it goes back to the point about vulnerabilities going beyond poverty as a monetary measures, going beyond poverty and being more looking more about vulnerabilities holistically, and human being as also holistically. So I can't say much, also because even in UNDP we don't have much of the key messages so far, because it's very strictly embargoed until the 6th of May. But I strongly suggest you to keep an eye out for when it will come out. it looks at the impact channels of AI, correct? And here is a snapshot of the impacts of digital technology on adult population, so the plus and the minuses. And then this will have an impact on policy design and policy making, correct? Societal transformation have require institutional and policy innovation. But at the same time also require mobilizing new coalition to empower people to navigate the new reality. So policy and one of the messages is coming out from the Human Development Report is that policy and institutional design should aim at a series of new factors or new elements. And some of these include redress harmful impacts on cognition, behavior, and well-being, sizing opportunities of AI application to reduce inequalities from the start, rather than reiterating or protracting the status quo, if not even increasing and expand and creating new inequalities or divide. So focusing policy and institutional design should focus on leverage technology to augment human skills rather than replace them. And this is definitely a debate that is very much going on, considering that much of the studies and analysis around AI mostly focus on the impact on AI on labor markets. And I'm sure you may have seen some of that literature and work. And so how AI can augment human beings and labors and skills, or replace them. And then one of the another key underlying messages from the Human Development Report that will be brought forward is to promote digital literacy, which I think is very much connected to poverty alleviation measures, particularly in the age of digitalizations, and we're moving forward. And most likely it's very relevant for all of the countries you're living in at this moment in time. And the second one, and I'll conclude with this last slide, and if you want, we can go deeper according to your questions, is this other project that we're looking at. So AI and for human development, we are adding another layer of consideration, another lens, which is inequality. So what is the AI impact on inequality? And not only inequality within countries, which is something that, again, is fairly well addressed, although at the early stages, but by the current studies that looks at the impact on labor market, and so within countries. But what is the AI impact of across countries inequalities? And this is due to AI's benefit that may be sized disproportionately by the richer countries, and or the potential cost due to the disruptions caused by AI that may be borne more considerably by the poorer countries. And again, all these analyses have then an impact on policy design, institutional design, and sustainable development. The difference on this work specifically that we are on, also with colleague from Tsinghua University, is that it looks at Asia Pacific and speaks very much to the context of this specific region. And I think with that, I will, for the time being, pause here and check if there is any question from the floor or online. Let me stop sharing so I can see people also online or comments.
Thank you, William. Yeah.
Please, anyone, at least we could start from the question I posed. Oh, Maria, I can see you. I can see you online. Raise hand. Please go ahead, Maria Emilia.
Hi, good morning. Well, good morning here. Good evening, if you're other part of the world. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is related, like, what do you recommend us when, like, to be a good measure when we're looking for the impact of the solutions that we are supposed to create?
Good measure of the impact.
Yeah, how can we, I don't know, like you're studying more this topic, so maybe if you know a little bit more of forms to measure our impact to see and have like the like more relatable data for to see if our solution is good or enough.
I think you put data is the king, correct? What AI, and I think not only AI, because nowadays we also tend to, and that's also my fault perhaps, but tend to label a lot of the new technology into the AI world, which is becoming very much a buzzword. But let's say technology, the innovation that we have seen in the last 10 years through digitalization, IoTCs and so forth, and it coming to AI, I think has empowered us through the creation of a lot of data that we need, and this is where I can come in, learn to use better. So this question about how do we measure impact is something that is very important in what I do as a development economist, but also as the office, for instance, how do we measure impact of our projects? There are different layers. You have unstructured data that comes from the project itself, correct? And a lot of time they sit on project documents, and you have to have someone, in the past, you had to have someone that needs to physically go and read stuff and look for data, correct? You have internal documents that we produce for the governments that includes a wealth of data. Nowadays, what AI allows us to do that, and this is quoting an AI expert I was talking today and trying to help me in doing this, is like you plug everything on a cloud. You clearly have to use a research agent which is trained in that space, but then you can extract data that you will not even think about before. So data is absolutely key. How to, and AI, I think, and this whole advancement through research agents, how can use unstructured data better and connect them for a clearer picture. And the second reflection is time horizon, which is quite key. What we're looking, the impact many times takes time, correct? You have a project that delivers the app on tourism, correct? The project finished at the end of December. We delivered the app, we delivered the solutions, we gave the training, everybody has access. But we don't know about the impact, correct? It will take time, because it will take time for that specifically hotel owner or restaurant person to invest and understand better the client's need. It just maybe a year or two, and then you will see the impacts, correct? But that lag is a bit of for reporting, it's a problem. So what, for instance, at UNDP we're trying to do now is go back to projects that have been closed for a couple of years or even 5 years, the previous cycles, and trying to go back to the ground and check and do a new assessment and a new surveys, because sustainable impact just takes time to reveal itself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Can I? William, can we pick up a couple of questions at the same time, and then you choose and combine, the questions and give some answer, okay? I can see another, hand online. So, Hoyt, right? So you can ask question now, and I also see any hand from here. You want to ask question? Okay, so one from the online and one from the offline. Okay, well, I will ask them to ask question first, and then we'll expect you answer. Sebastian, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello. Do you hear me correctly?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, so my question is similar to the previous question, to the one um, from our colleague there. So how do you estimate the validity of a project? Because the poverty reduction is very long-term viewed, and it is very subject. Uh, it is very sensitive to the changes in geopolitical stuff and how social behavior changes. So how do you guys kind of like not predict but estimate the validity of any project that you start?
We have another question online.
Yeah, exactly. Just one moment. I see the Professor Maria. Just 1 minute. I will ask the offline student to ask another question. Okay, Maria, wait a minute, please.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, you've mentioned that UNDP is utilizing AI tools in every region in the world. So my question is, how does the Latin America do for the AI utilizing for their poverty reduction? I've seen a case of using AI for their election. So I wondered, will there be more cases about Latin America? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Just one moment. Professor Maria, you want to join this group, or after the answer from the Wayland and you will ask a question, what you prefer?
I can ask now. It's very
Please.
very short.
Yeah, please.
Thanks so much for this presentation. And it was very interesting. I was wondering if you could give us more context in terms of how to engage with communities or groups that might be less attentive or less receptive of artificial intelligence technologies. So I'm thinking, for example, how do you access and get engaged communities from, for example, rural areas or older populations. As you were saying, right, they most of the times are the most vulnerable ones, right? We know that, of course, younger generations might be more, might be closer to using these technologies, but how to engage those other groups and categories that might be more, reluctant to engage in projects using artificial intelligence, or maybe you have a different experience. But I wonder if you could talk about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all these questions. Let me start maybe from the first one. The validity of the project. Joan Sebastian, I don't understand. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean, poverty and geopolitics. But let's put it, maybe I'll try to answer and then you let me know and we can have another round. Specifically on the validity of the project, and this is project around poverty, but it could be project around the environment or governance. At least UNDP has quite a strict setup and standards, whereby when you design a project, you really they're quite detailed analysis of the vulnerabilities that you're trying to tackle, the challenges on the grounds, and this allow you to in the local context, and this allow you to also allow UNDP in this case to design key performance indicators, let's go that way, or targets, definitely targets that the project should aim at to meet at the end of this of the project. So this is clearly heavily reliant on data. There are countries where this is slightly easier because the data structure is more mature than others. But it's that's how at the first round we look at the validity of the project. So have they met the targets? Have we reached the beneficiary that we were thinking to reach? Did we reach more? Were we more efficient in actually delivering delivering these solutions or not? And then the second layer is a bit what we were talking about before with Maria. So go back later on and perhaps have a second assessment on how the development impact on the long term is revealing itself. On poverty geopolitics, if I understand correctly your question, I think that's where we have the HDI or the well-defined, let's put it this way, well-defined classification and definition done by international institutions like the World Bank or UNDP. These are member state organizations, and yes, certain member states may not like the results of the Human Development Report or where the country sit, but there is not much they can do about it because these are very well established, solid, analytically and very well balanced way of measuring this type of vulnerabilities. On the Latin America AI application, I'm afraid I don't have the answer, but I will be happy to share through also Professor Chen all the links and also to the regional bureau in Latin America, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of inspiring examples of how AI is applied in that continent. And finally, Professor Mendez, thank you very much for your question. So how to engage communities that are more vulnerable already to start with, I guess, correct? So this is a good question, and to be fair, I personally do not have an answer, but it's also, it's not necessarily related to AI, correct? This also can talked about normal technology, let's say, not as advanced technology as AI, because of the digital gaps that digital divides. These are usually the cohort, the population that always have digitally not literate, literacy is lower, they have less access to the internet, of devices and so forth. What on AI, I think in particular, an interesting aspect that I think AI governance will have to think about it is also who designs AI and where the data are coming from, correct? Because in a way, if you're thinking that you are using an AI application which is based on data and algorithm that do not represent any of those communities, it doesn't matter because they may not accept it because it's not actually relevant for that group of people. So this development of an AI solution, it's in developing, it's quite critical to ensure that the basis on which they're built reflect the target audience you're trying to talk. And this is what at UNDP we're trying to do. And at the application level and the policy level, highlighting these issues around data and data representation and who gets excluded and how that's important for effective decision making, because otherwise we end up making the wrong decision. But I think it's a very good point that you're asking, and maybe I can share with you in 6 months' time the regional AI for Human Development report has a chapter exactly on that. I mean, it will be focused on Asia Pacific, but it will be interesting to have maybe a dialogue between what you're seeing in Latin America and what we are seeing here in this region.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from my classroom and also from my friends online? Just now, I saw one of the message from Brazil, right? Is that a question or not? And I'm asking it's not a question. It's a comment or not? No. It's
just a recommend.
Is it just a recommend? Okay, yeah. If my young friends here, you don't ask question, I actually have a question. I want to take this advantages to ask. William, actually, I see some of the concerns for using AI or broadly using the digital type of tool. See, one thing that you mentioned, even though right now what we're talking about is how to use AI to help the poverty alleviation, right? But what you mentioned just now also have another aspect, meaning that maybe using AI might create new type of the poverty phenomena, right? That's one thing. How UNDP and how the expert like yourself trying to tackle this type of challenge. That's one thing. The other thing is that even before we're talking about AI, when we try to promote the digitalization, and we always met the problem of, the data security issue, right? So on one hand, people want to use the digital tool to improve something, but on the other hand, you always feel you have the obstacle in front of you regarding the data security. So is there any sort of solution or thinking clue from the authorized institution like UNDP regarding this type of challenge? Yeah, that's the two type of concerns that in front of you. Okay.
Professor Chen, thank you very much. I wish your colleague from Tsinghua were here, the one writing the paper for me.
Okay.
Won't be able to answer. But let me try to have the conversation, to try to answer, particularly your point. I think it's an easier one for me. Evidence-based analysis to inform decision makers on options, way forward, risks, and consequences of actions. And this is how at UNDP we are trying to address, or let's say, alert decision makers about the risk around AI. And this is why the Human Development Report talks about AI, why we're now doing this regional piece. We're trying to bring evidence, examples of good application that promote equality. So where AI becomes an equalizer, and applications or use of AI where it expands inequality and has a negative impact on human development. With a caveat, I would say, at least this is my personal opinion, that the technology itself is neutral. It's policy and how we design policy that really matters in shaping this new world, basically, which at this moment we're finding ourselves facing. And in this, going back a bit to your second point, on data security, UNDP or the UN, what we're trying to bring is working as a convening platform that brings the different stakeholders together. And the high-level advisory body by the UN Secretary General is an example of that. Or the Digital Compact, that is one of the two annexes to the Pact for the Future that was launched in last year in September at the General Assembly, which defines certain pathways for countries to dialogue and to engage on this very complex issue, which is governance of AI. With the aim, I think the aim is twofold. First of all, is having a technology that enhances human development rather than has a negative impact on human development. And the second one is to have a collaborative approach to it. So that, because again, it's a challenge that has no borders, a bit like climate change, correct? So it's very difficult to contain it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. William, is there any other questions from here and online? If no, I'd like to sort of close this part. Actually, thank you very much for this excellent speech. and your insight on the, the poverty alleviation as well as AI. I think today we're opening a dialogue on the poverty alleviation with AI, okay? This is a kind of new approach that everyone here, we need to put some effort there and trying to figure out, is there any appropriate way to do it, right? At the same time, while we're talking about AI, beyond with AI towards the poverty alleviation, there were still some kind of concerns existing or on the table, right? Data security and AI risk, these type of things, right? So we are at the timing that we try all the way to have the intensive thinking about AI issue, right? With AI, we want the AI to help us to improve the poverty alleviation, but at the same time, we also need to know more about AI so that we can use this type of power more appropriately, right? So actually, thank you very much, William. We hope that in our challenge program, we can welcome to join us to have further discussion. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's keep.
Thank you very much, Professor Chen. Thank you all.
Okay.
Looking forward to the next dialogue. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I will give my student and online student for like 10 minutes the rest. And after that, we come back for 2 more lectures. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, William. And thank you, everyone. So you have 10 minutes left. Right?
Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So everyone here, let's start the second session. Actually, the second session is on Chile mainly. We have 2 distinguished professors, and also we have our very good friends, Professor Maribel Flores being with us. And Maribel is the director, Professor Maribel is the director of Global Learning Office and also the director of the Office of Vice Presidency for International Affairs from the Catholic University, Chile. She did a wonderful job collaborating with us, and we have done a wonderful project last year. Okay, so actually I would like to shift this floor to Maribel and let her to mobilize to coordinate the second session. All right, so Maribel, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Tao Tao. And thank you as well to Professor Violante for a wonderful and insightful first session. It's great to see all the enthusiasm from the students joining us now. And we really had a chance to get a broad picture on different ways to measure the multidimensional poverty, the emergence of the global governance frameworks and initiatives for AI, as well as examples of artificial intelligence applications that can contribute to human well-being and can certainly have a significant impact on something so central to us as the stages of human development. Well, for those of you who are just joining us now, all of the master classes and lectures will be recorded and made available to you. You can see them later on. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and our professors Maria Luisa Mendez and Magdalena Valdez, who will share their perspectives and research with us regarding poverty alleviation approaches in the Latin American context, urban spaces and social cohesion, as well as rural landscapes and environmental factors. As we deepen our knowledge on what multidimensional poverty reduction might look like, I encourage everyone to stay attentive and listen actively. I also see students very eager to reach out and find their international teammates, which you can also do later on the WeChat channel. I hope you're getting a chance to make connections and get to know your peers. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you all Maria Luisa Mendez, the director of the Center for Social Conflict and Cohesion Studies, COES, and the principal investigator of the Geographies of Conflict research line at the center. She is full professor at the Institute of Urban and Territorial Studies at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. Maria Luisa holds a master's degrees in anthropology and development from the University of Chile, a master's in cultural studies and sociology from the University of Birmingham, and a PhD in sociology from the University of Manchester. She is the author of the book Upper Middle Class Social Reproduction and the corresponding editor of the International Journal of Urban and Regional Research, as well as a senior visiting fellow at the International Inequalities Institute at the London School of Economics. Since 2019, Maria Luisa has been at UC Chile, and in 2024, she became an advisor to the National Council for Science, Technology, and Innovation and Knowledge, and a member of the Kaizen Survey Expert Group. She is currently the principal investigator for the Fondesit project, The Changing Geography of Privilege in Contemporary Santiago, Differentiation of Elites, and the Dispute for New Centers of Power. Her research topics include the subjective aspects of mobility and social stratification, the construction of neighborhood belonging, and urban conflict. Welcome, Maria Luisa. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, and we look forward to your lecture.
Thank you very much, Maribel, and thank you to Professor Tao Tao. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And it was very interesting to have also the opportunity to see the previous presentation. So what I'm trying to do, what I will try to do today is to give you an overview of what I consider some of the challenges that we have to take into account when we think about problems of poverty and multidimensional understanding of poverty and poverty alleviation, and also the issue of inequality in contemporary society, especially from the global south. So if I can share my screen. Yes. So do you get to see my screen? Yes?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Very well, yeah.
Okay. So I slightly changed the title of the presentation because I also wanted to, I listened to the previous presentation from the representative of UNDP program. And so I'm going to try to connect some of the points that were raised also in her presentation. So what I would like to talk about is obviously in the context of poverty alleviation and considering the multidimensional understanding of poverty, right? Not only in terms of income, but also in terms of social networks, in terms of access to services, and in terms also of education and also representation, right? We heard in the previous presentation that we talked about artificial intelligence and how algorithms may or may not represent different groups in society. So these are the issues that we should be concerned about. So I'm going to try to think largely in terms of an ample, a more complex understanding of poverty and inequality in contemporary societies of Latin America, Chile, Brazil, and others. And also I'm going to pose the problem of social mobility as one of the horizons that and the promises that most of the political programs of the return of democracy posed as an interesting, as an important horizon for our societies that moved from important levels of poverty to the growth of the middle classes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the issue of social mobility, and I want to then connect to the problem of social cohesion, which I think from the point of view of what we do at the Center of Studies of Conflict and Social Cohesion in Chile is one of the most important and relevant challenges that we have to face in not only in global South societies, but in the world at large. So basically the diminishing levels of trust, interpersonal trust, institutional trust, the lack of participation, the lack of sense of belonging, etc. So I'm gonna give some reflections on this, and I'm gonna pose some challenges to these topics on certain urban contexts, of course, which are very varied, right? We have the cases of large cities, you know, like capital cities, especially in China, large metropolis, but we also have challenges in smaller rural urban areas, and also in the continuum of areas that are connecting the rural and the urban. So I'm thinking a bit in those terms. So I want to start by showing this graph in which we see how over recent decades, Chile has improved notably in terms of income, in terms of, you know, GDP per capita, coming from a very problematic situation in the 80s, you know, and globally we had very strong economic crisis throughout the world, but Chile has been quite well known for what we have described as the reduction of poverty and extreme poverty. So this is a graph that basically reminds us where we come from and where we are at the moment. And basically, it's one of the arguments that have been taken to talk about the ways in which our societies, and one of them is Chile, have been going through a process of social change in terms of the growth of the middle classes. And this is also valid to other societies, such as I was saying, Brazil or South Africa and other regions of the world. And this is a graph, as I was saying, about the situation of poverty and extreme poverty. If you think about this, extreme poverty and poverty reduction have been one of the main objectives in the 90s, and at least until the very early years of 2000, and for different reasons and policies, those programs that are targeting poverty groups have been quite successful in terms of the reduction, especially in terms of income. For example, another area that is important to take into account is the level of education, which has also increased enormously in a very short period of time, you know, for both men and women. And also the average rate of students the number of students joining tertiary education, you know, new students at the universities, new professionals, you know, in families that most of them did not have, their children did not have access to university studies in the past. That has changed enormously in the last 3-4 decades, which is also part of the puzzle that we have to face. This is obviously very good news in itself, not only in terms of the inclusion or access to the labor market, but also in terms of the access to information, to networks, to a higher status and more recognition of people. But also it's part of the puzzle because it's also described by the literature that it poses an enormous challenge in terms of expectations to have good quality jobs, to access, you know, higher positions in the labor market and also the social structure. This has been supported on the one hand on the shoulders of families, because we also have a system in which for a long time families had to get access to loans to pay for the access or for the study at the university level. But there has also been new policies for, you know, for scholarships and from funding from the public sector. So it has been supported, as I was saying, by families, by loans, and also by the policies that have increased the funding for students to get access to university, especially those that are in the lowest 60% of the income groups. So we can say that Chile has experienced a significant development during this last 3 decades at least. And of course, this development has involved change in not only in economic terms, but also in terms of how people, how society at large thinks about itself, you know, and also the expectations that people, groups, families, and the society in itself has as, you know, as a view for the future, the expectations that we've got in the future. I don't have enough time here to go into detail into this, but it's interesting to see how we have measured throughout, you know, a long period of time, the expectations of people in terms of the future and how they continuously see their children occupying better positions than themselves, you know, parents and also grandparents. So there is an important change in terms of people and the way in which people see themselves as part of a larger middle class society, and also the expectations that they have in terms of Chile as a society in which they are expecting to receive also the benefits of development as well, you know. So this is very important, I think, to think about the challenges that we face when we think about developing programs, initiatives of poverty alleviation, inequality reduction, especially because of this context in which we are moving, right? We are not, at the moment, at least in Chile, we are not a society that see itself as it was in the past, right? So, and there have been, you know, different arguments showing that we have followed an interesting path, but this has also come with a lot of tensions and problems that have been inherited in the long and shorter terms. And one of them is the persistence of inequality, right? And by that, I mean not only the gap between the rich and the poor, but also other forms of inequalities that have to be considered in when we think about societies, especially those in Latin America, that have this long history of, this colonial past and this long history of other forms of inequalities, such as ethnic inequalities, territorial inequalities, and gender inequalities. So what I wanted to stress is that we have, on the one hand, you know, this development and growth of the middle classes with higher levels of education, new occupations, migration from the rural to the urban cities, and of course, new expectations about the future, but also this coexists with persistent higher levels of inequality in its different forms. So here we have a graph on the inequality that we can describe as obviously economic inequality. And as you see, if we think about Chile as a middle class and lower middle class society, we are not that, unequal. If you think about the first four quintiles, it's not that large the gap between the first four. The largest gap is with the last one, with a fifth quintile. So this is something not only important in terms of redistribution policies, but also in terms of how society perceives these sometimes unjustified and not legitimate differences with most privileged groups. So this is also something important to consider, I think, when we think about how to tackle issues of poverty, issues of inequality in contemporary societies. Here's also another measure that is very well known, right? The Gini index has been slowly reducing, but still it's important throughout, the past 4 decades in the country. And here we've got all other measures in which you can also compare the situation in other countries, right? So Chile is among those that are seen as more in this metric, more unequal, right, compared to other countries throughout the world. One of the issues that is very, very important to consider is that I mean, there's a lot of debate on this, but many authors have emphasized that the transition of families towards this more middle class positions, those that have overcome poverty, have also relied on debt, right? So for example, have relied on debt in terms of paying for university, have relied extensively on debt for paying for housing, and lately have relied intensively in debt in terms of paying not only holidays, but also even, for, everyday monthly, expenses, and such as, for example, food and other services. So this is something very important to consider when we think about what we see in vulnerable groups, right? Those are not immediately seen as poor groups, but are in high vulnerability. And one of the aspects involved in that vulnerability is their level of indebtedness, right? Which is high, very high, and has been increasing over the past 2 decades intensively. So here we have a graph on the relationship between mobility and inequality. And I'm showing this graph because one of the key aspects of the literature on social conflict and social malaise is the relationship between mobility and inequality. So many authors and international institutions have raised red flags in terms of the interaction between low levels of social mobility and high levels of social inequality, showing that those situations, that interaction can lead to enormous levels of social unrest, malaise, that could also end up in the more concrete manifestations of different forms of social conflict. And in in a way, we had some of that in Chile 5 years ago, but it was also part of a more than a decade of different forms of conflict around housing, around the environment, around groups, around environmental issues, etc. So this is just to show you that in the case of, for example, countries in Latin America, such as Colombia, Brazil, Chile, Argentina, right? We've got a situation in which we have rather low levels of mobility and high levels of inequality. In the case of China, for example, we've got it's rather in the middle of the level of inequality with somehow lower levels of social mobility compared to other countries in the rest of the world. We have other countries that have low level of inequality and high levels of mobility in countries such as Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, etc. So this is just to show you that we have that this part of this context to take into account. This is something that has been very, very important in terms of thinking about the future and the expectations of families, especially those that have been getting access to higher level of education. So this is the number of generations that would be involved in the transition from the lowest 10% to reach a middle income in different societies. So here we have that in the case of Chile, that would happen throughout 5 generations, or sorry, 6 generations. So this is something very, very important to consider. You know, is it fair to think that just given the place where you live or you are born involves that your lifetime would not be enough for you to move to a different, you know, social class or socioeconomic group? Is it a fair situation? Is it perceived as fair for people, or people do accept this condition as it is? I think that what we have in contemporary societies is that these kind of situations are being seen more critically, and people have obviously you know, this optimism about the future, but are more concerned about the possibilities to actually fulfill these expectations. So this is also part of the puzzles that we have to sort out. This is one of the paradoxes, or not paradoxes, but main problems that have been described, for example, as the broken social elevator, especially the elevator of education, right? So is it enough with what we are doing or have been doing in terms of higher access to education? Should we do something different? Is it the problem in terms of education and the education system, or is it also the problem of labor markets? Is it the problem of lack of innovation? Is it a problem of new technologies, for example, as artificial intelligence? We have to discuss this deeply, right? But what we do know is that there's an increase fear of, described by the literature, fear of falling, and that means going back into a position that families left, you know, some time ago, or felt that they left in terms of, you know, extreme poverty or poverty levels. So there are concerns about failed promises of social mobility and the frustration and the impact that this has in terms of well-being of communities, families, etc. And not only in terms of, you know, their means, economic means, but also in terms even to their mental health and other expressions of well-being. So this is something that I wanted to also raise as a concern, and also the problem of the legitimacy of meritocracy. What we find in the different surveys is that people still believe in meritocracy, but they are very critical of how it works, you know, basically saying, well, we would like to have a meritocratic system in which valuable resources are distributed by your talent and your effort, but we don't see that that is happening because basically we don't see that our, you know, effort has enough retribution. Okay, so the vicious confluence of poor educational opportunities, low skills, and limited employment prospects can trap people in situations where they are also far from likely to be exposed to environmental hazards and violence, for example. As a result of this multidimensional inequality, and I would also add, you know, poverty, multidimensional poverty, people see that some individual cities, regions thrive, right, develop, while others fall further behind. So this is something very, very important to consider. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on mobility, just to remind us that a mobile society and a society with high levels of social mobility would be characterized by, you know, a set of tools that enable individuals and families to modify their living conditions. So do we have this? Do we have enough tools available for families, especially for more vulnerable backgrounds, to actively modify their living conditions? That was basically what I was also exploring with my question when I asked about, you know, how far or close are certain groups, more vulnerable groups, to artificial intelligence, you know, can them, you know, appreciate or feel comfortable with the use of new technologies? Are these tools really available for everyone, or we have to consider other, you know, gaps behind, you know, in terms of literacy, but also access, territorial inequality, even gender, etc. Right? So this is just to remind us of what would be, you know, a more mobile society. And what we have in the case of many Latin American countries in the current situation is that mobility has been, you know, stagnated. It has it hasn't been as marked as it was in previous decades. There's a weakening of meritocracy, not because people don't believe in meritocracy or don't want to have meritocracy, but because they don't think it's working adequately. So what we have is what we have described, especially after the pandemic, it's a more critical condition or situation of the middle classes, a bit of an impoverishment of the middle classes. Some of the authors have described it as a pauperization of the middle classes. And of course, this coexists with some expressions of, you know, mobilization and conflicts in all these areas, in education, environment, labor, you know, urban, the right to the city, housing, the feminist movement, indigenous issues, etc. So this is just to give you a brief account of the expression in which that expression that it takes in terms of the unrest that this situation is basically provoking, or it's producing in terms of, you know, the larger the largest group in society, which is the middle class in societies such as Chile. There's also, I'm not going to go into I'm not going to go into deep analysis of this, but there's also a more critical view of the elites as well, not only the political elites, but also those groups that are seen as more privileged, and those groups that are seen as receiving all the benefits of a society that went through, you know, an enormous progress, but wasn't actually seen as well distributed throughout the population. Broken elevator and the weakening of social cohesion. This is something that I would like to refer to at the end of my presentation. So this is broken elevator. That means the stagnation of social mobility and the weakening of social cohesion, right? Social cohesion understood as the quality and the state of social bonds within a given society, which involves, you know, a sense of belonging, social ties, trust to institutions, trust toward interpersonal relations, and also the ways in which people are able and interested in engaging in pro-social behavior, in solidarity, in the orientation towards a common good. So why is it that that we are interested in this? And it's basically because the lack of, you know, the problems of persistent social cohesion has provoked, in a way, structural problems that have ended in the weakening of social trust. You know, people don't believe or don't trust necessarily the same principles and the same institutions that were supposed to, for example, redistribute, you know, social opportunities. So people are less reluctant to sometimes to trust certain institutions. So we have to be very, very careful and aware of this if we want to, for example, propose initiatives that would be allocated in, for example, in educational institutions or public or public institutions, or even policy, initiatives that are going to work with, for example, the private sector. We also have to be aware that there's some, you know, lack of trust in terms of how certain institutions are delivering or not, you know, more opportunities to larger parts of the society. So this is also important because social cohesion has to do with belonging and having a sense of belonging. And the problem with inequality and poverty in a multidimensional understanding is that many or an important part of the population doesn't feel that they belong to the society at large, and the ways in which society is portraying or showing itself to, you know, other contexts. For example, in the case of Chile, Chile was seen and also presented itself as a very prosperous society, but many groups within had this vision in which they didn't feel that they belonged to this narrative of, you know, success and mobility. So we have a problem of deterioration of social cohesion, and this is something that also has to be considered in all the initiatives of poverty alleviation. We have to think carefully about the state, the quality of social bonds in which we are gonna work, you know. We don't have to consider a priori that social bonds are gonna be in good shape and health. So we have to think carefully about this. And this goes not only in terms of institutional trust, but also interpersonal ties and community ties as well. So just to finish, these are two images of Santiago in its more prosperous version of itself. The one on your right with the highest tower in Latin America, and the mountains, you know, very prosperous, and the coexistence of nature and progress, urban progress. And on your left, this is one of the most elitist schools in Chile, private school. And this is just to show you the scale of this school, right? This private school, obviously, it's located in a very, very and highly segregated area of Santiago. This is just to show you the scale of the school, because now I'm going to show you, you know, these pictures, images of social housing. The one below has been demolished because it was of very, very low quality. But it's located in very, very segregated areas in the outskirts of Santiago, very poor quality in terms of, you know, access, in terms of public space, in terms of, you know, green areas, the access to, you know, good quality services of education, etc. And the one in the above is a new project that has been built in more central areas. This is also social housing, but this is built in more central areas with the different quality, with more public space, and especially with the intense participation of residents, inhabitants, communities, organizations, etc. So this is just to show you that we have an enormous challenge also in terms of, you know, what has been described as the right to the city, the right to housing, but it also involves not only having a house, you know, a dwelling, but having, you know, the right to centrality, the right to access good quality services, to the right to affordable housing and good quality housing. And this is also obviously much more urgent for more vulnerable groups and lower income groups, but also it has been shown that middle class groups and younger generations are facing the problem of housing affordability, and it will become a much more drastic problematic in the near future. And this is just to, you know, to show, to finish with some other connections with the previous presentation from what I've discussed today. We still have challenges in terms of, you know, how to think about reducing these different forms of inequality, not only those that have to do with income, you know, those that have to do with class, but also those that have to do with gender. You know, for example, gender has been described as one of the most important aspects that we have to consider in terms of housing policies, because women are those that are most involved in social reproduction and involved in these demands for, you know, dignified housing. And most of the time, policies and programs are not gender specific in terms of, for example, the ways in which they relate or, you know, meet their expectations. Obviously, we have in Latin America still enormous gaps in terms of the situation of ethnic groups, you know, especially in the south of the country, but also in the north. What to do with the broken elevator issue? Is it a problem of more education, better quality education? Is it a problem of the labor market? Is it a problem of the diversification, innovation, the use of new technologies? How to tackle these challenges is something that we should discuss. The issue of informality is also very, very important. Is it enough of you know, what we are doing in terms of informal occupations. Is it a moment in which we should also think about, you know, the transit to more a formal economy, etc. We have problems, of course, in terms of other global concerns such as, you know, climate change or climate-related events, and how these affect more drastically vulnerable communities in rural areas, children, women, older population, etc. And of course, in a more transversal way, how to incorporate aspects related to cohesion, to social bonding, to sense of belonging, to participation, to orientation, to the common good, into all these different policies, initiatives, and projects. So this is what I wanted to discuss with you, and I would be happy to receive comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Maria Luisa. That was a really interesting presentation, and we get to learn a lot about the reality here in Chile, and which is similar as well to in other parts of the region. So, all right, students, do you have any questions for Professor Maria Luisa Mendez? You can put them in the chat. You can go ahead and turn on your camera and just let us know.
Yeah. Maribel, we have a student asking question here.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Let's go for it.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. I have a question about the relation between social mobility and inequality. That picture, I really appreciate this picture. This is from OECD 2018. I have a question about the horizontal horizontal index of the. I have noticed about Gini coefficient in equity of 25 years ago, and the vertical axis refers to more mobility. Could you please give us more details about this investigation and more data analysis? Because that's very important for the clarifications of different nations and their position in the world. But the data is from 2018. I also hope to know about the latest information about data. Thanks. Gracias.
Okay, thanks so much. De nada, thank you. So question is to tell us a little bit more about how that Gini index works and how's the situation since 2018.
Okay, I think that the interesting point here was I'm looking at the graph, the one on the OECD on 2018 that connects inequality. I'm going to share the screen.
Great.
Right. Okay. So yeah, this graph.
Yeah, right.
There we go.
Sorry. Can you see the graph now?
Yes, very clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a graph that I took from one of these reports from OECD, especially those that were connected to the problem of the broken elevator and the problem of social mobility in different countries in the world. And this concern came because there was a problem of, as I was saying, you know, stagnation of mobility more generally in different countries. So basically the question of whereas we as societies are experiencing, you know, permanently levels of social mobility, or social mobility has to do with certain specific, you know, moments in time in which there is, you know, different structural conditions and prosperity, and this allows societies to move up more structurally? Or is it a problem of, or a situation in which societies permanently, open space for some groups and positions to move up in the social scale? And what one of the main conclusions of this report is that we don't have over the past, I don't know, more than 3 decades, we haven't had larger processes of social mobility. That means processes in which larger parts of the society move up. For example, something that happens in processes of industrialization, in which many groups can move, from lower qualified positions to more qualified positions, and with that they have an increase in terms of income and also social status. And what they concluded is that we don't have that at the moment, in present times. But what we do have is, more of a situation in which some positions in society are more able to develop, social mobility, because they are basically in privileged positions to do that, because, for example, they have access to education, or a higher level of education or professional education, or they have occupations that are more valuable at that time, at that moment in time. So with that having in mind, what they do is that they connected mobility in basically socio-economic terms. I mean, moving from different positions in economic terms, income groups, how they moved in terms of income groups, and inequality measured in terms of Gini coefficient. So basically, I mean, and here I can rely on on the expertise of Professor Tao and other professors that come from economics to define better than me, of course, what Gini means, but it has to do with the ways in which, larger parts of society have access or not to opportunities and, income and wealth, or whether those opportunities are concentrated in fewer positions and hands in society. So basically, that's what I could share with you. I'm not an expert in the mathematics or statistics of this graph. I just wanted to put it as a context of problematics that are intersected. And at the moment in 2025, I don't think that we have overcome this tensions of low mobility and higher inequality. But I mean, this is something that we can discuss further if you want.
Muchas gracias.
De nada.
Thanks so much. All right. Well, in the interest of time, I think that it would be great to go ahead with the next lecture. So I'll go ahead and present everyone to Professor Magdalena Valdez. One moment.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
All right.
Hello.
Yes. Hold on a moment, Magdalena. Hold on a second. Just one moment. Okay. Magdalena Valdez is professor and coordinator of workshop number 5 in the School of Agronomy and Forestry Engineering at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, an undergraduate applied course focused on the engineering economics discipline. Magdalena is an agronomy engineer with a specialization in agrarian economics from Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. She holds a master's degree in the conservation of phytogenic resources from the Polytechnic University of Madrid. And she has more than 20 years of experience in both public and private sectors in planning, developing, and executing projects. Her main skills include leadership in articulating multidisciplinary initiatives, teamwork orientation, process optimization, monitoring, and achieving results. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you very much, Maribel, for this presentation. I'd like to share my screen now. No. Let me. I'm sorry. This is not what I'd like to share. Wait a minute, please. Going there, please. Just a moment. Coming up. Thank you very much for your patience. And there it is. There it is, right?
Yes, yes, we can see it clearly.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today's session. Seeds for the Future invites us to reflect on how plant genetic resources can be catalysts for rural transformation. Today, we'll explore how biodiversity, when preserved and wisely used, offers powerful tools to alleviate poverty and strengthen local food systems. Let's begin by recognizing that the seeds we safeguard today hold the promise of a more resilient and inclusive tomorrow. This works. I'm so sorry. Okay. This presentation begins by briefly examining the nature of poverty in rural areas in Chile, contrasting it with urban poverty to highlight the specific structural and territorial challenges faced in rural communities. We will then introduce essential concepts related to plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, or PGRFA, setting the foundation for the role in sustainable rural development. We then focus on smallholder family farming as a key opportunity for linking biodiversity conservation with poverty alleviation. These farmers are not only food producers, but also custodians of agrobiodiversity and traditional knowledge. To conclude, we will look at an applied case study that illustrates how these ideas translate into practice, demonstrating that how conserving plant genetic resources and diversity can generate concrete benefits for rural development and community empowerment. While poverty exists in both rural and urban settings, its expression and underlying drivers differ significantly. Notably, in Chile, rural multidimensional poverty rates are 80% higher than those in urban areas, with significant disparities in access to basic services and environmental infrastructure. In rural Chile, poverty is shaped not only by income deprivation, but also by geographic isolation, limited access to services, and dependency on agriculture. Understanding these specific conditions is essential for designing effective interventions. The National Socioeconomic Characterization Survey, which was referred by Professor Maria Luisa, is a survey that has been regularly conducted in the country since 1987, with the aim of periodically assessing the socioeconomic situation of households and the population. Despite overall progress, rural areas continue to exhibit higher poverty rates across all dimensions. According to that survey, rural poverty encompasses broader deprivations, including deficits in education, healthcare enrollment, access to basic services such as potable water and sanitation, environmental conditions, and mobility infrastructure. Rural households show marked disadvantages in 11 of the 17 multidimensional poverty indicators. This includes severe gaps in educational attainment, limited access to basic services like water and sanitation, and weaker social security coverage. Urban households earn on average 57% more in monetary income than rural households. However, rural families receive 53% more in public cash transfers, largely due to a higher proportion of elderly residents benefiting from targeted programs like the Universal Guaranteed Pension. These findings underscore the need for territorially tailored social policies that address structural disadvantages and promote equal opportunities for rural communities. Having understood the unique characteristics of rural poverty in Chile, we now explore how plant genetic resources offer a strategic pathway for sustainable development and poverty alleviation. Plant genetic resources underpin food security, enable climate resilience, and offer opportunities for rural development. Conserving and utilizing these resources strategically can support sustainable livelihoods and help address the structural roots of rural poverty. In this section, we will first define plant genetic resources, recognizing them as the foundation of food security. Of the foundation as food security and agricultural development. We'll then explore the concept of biodiversity as it relates to genetic variation within and among species. Next, we'll distinguish between two key conservation strategies: in situ conservation, which take place in natural ecosystems and on farms, and ex situ conservation, which involves preserving genetic material in gene banks, research centers, among other methodologies. Something going on. PGRFA form a fundamental component of biodiversity. They are essential for developing crop resilient to biotic and abiotic factors and diverse varieties that improve food security, dietary diversity, and sustainable livelihoods. The agricultural biodiversity provided by plant genetic resources offers natural defenses against pests, diseases, and environmental stresses such as drought and soil erosion, helping to build resilience in agricultural systems. In essence, plant genetic resources for food and agriculture are the foundation of sustainable agri-food systems. This concept includes a wide range of materials. First, recently developed cultivated varieties or cultivars, obsolete cultivars, primitive cultivars or land races and farmers' varieties, crop wild relatives, wild edible plants, breeding and research materials, or special genetic lines. The FAO's 2025 third report on plant genetic resources affirms that they are critical in adapting crops to biotic and abiotic stresses, enhancing resilience against pests, diseases, drought, and soil degradation. Despite their immense value, the global food supply increasingly depends on a narrow range of species. Protecting and diversifying plant genetic resources is thus a cornerstone of transforming agri-food systems towards sustainability and climate resilience. As integral elements of biodiversity, plant genetic resources are covered under the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, underscoring their global public good status and the need for equitable benefit sharing across nations. The global goals for living in harmony with nature within the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework seek a systematic transformation in society's relationship with biodiversity. The overall objective is to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 with a view to living in harmony with nature by 2050. This implies a long-term vision where biodiversity is valued, conserved, restored, and sustainably used, maintaining essential ecosystem services for all. In situ conservation refers to safeguarding plant genetic resources within their natural habitats or traditional agricultural systems. This includes crop wild relatives, wild food plants, and farmers' varieties or land races, which have evolved distinctive traits through generations of interaction with local environments and communities. The 2025 FAO report highlights that in situ strategies are dynamic. They allow genetic resources to continue adapting to environmental and socio-economic changes. Whether in forests, grasslands, or smallholder farms, these systems preserve not only biodiversity, but also cultural heritage and traditional knowledge. This form of conservation is vital for the resilience of food systems. It supports food security by maintaining genetic diversity essential for breeding climate-adapted, pest-resistant, and nutritious crops. However, in situ conservation faces challenges, obviously, from habitat loss to climate change and erosion of traditional practices, requiring integrated participatory strategies involving local communities and cross-sectoral collaboration. On the other hand, ex situ conservation refers to the preservation of plant genetic resources outside their natural habitats, typically in gene banks or similar facilities. This method plays a critical role in safeguarding biodiversity under controlled conditions that ensures the long-term availability of genetic materials for research, breeding, and restoration efforts. According to the 2025 FAO report, over 5.9 million accessions are maintained globally across national, regional, and international collections. The majority are stored as seeds, but also include field gene banks, in vitro cultures, and cryopreserved materials. These collections are essential for preserving genetic traits that may no longer survive in the wild due to the habitat loss, climate change, and agricultural intensification. Ex situ conservation complements in situ efforts by serving as a backup and enabling targeted access to specific genotypes, especially for crops critical for food security. It also contributes to achieving international targets such as Sustainable Development Goal 2, Zero Hunger, by maintaining genetic diversity and promoting equitable benefit sharing. Why does plant genetic resources diversity matter for global food security? Because over 80% of the world's food comes from plants, maintaining the diversity of plant genetic resources. That's why it is essential. This diversity enables the development of resilient crops, those capable of withstanding droughts, pests, and soil degradation, while also supporting food diversity, sustainable livelihoods, and nutritional security. The 2025 FAO report warns that just 9 crops now account for over 60% of global crop production. This narrowing of our food base heightens vulnerability to climate shocks and undermines resilience. Plant genetic resources diversity provides the genetic building blocks needed to adapt agriculture to changing conditions and to breed new, nutritious, and market-relevant varieties. Safeguarding and using this diversity through conservation in gene banks, on farms, and in natural ecosystems is a cornerstone of transforming agri-food systems. It strengthens food systems, especially for smallholders and indigenous peoples, and helps turn global challenges into opportunities for inclusive and sustainable development. Let's pause and consider a key question. Can biodiversity play a role in reducing poverty? This question becomes especially relevant in rural and agricultural contexts where livelihoods and ecosystems are deeply intertwined. Exploring this connection opens new ways to think about development, sustainability, and resilience. At first, we can say that biodiversity underpins food security and nutrition. A diverse range of crops provides essential macronutrients and dietary variety, helping reduce malnutrition in vulnerable populations. Locally adapted varieties often have traits that are better suited to the nutritional needs and cultural preferences of rural communities. Small-scale farmers can benefit from traditional and underutilized crops that may have high market value. Conserved plant genetic resources can lead to the development of niche markets, for example, organic, heirloom, or climate resilient varieties, offering new income opportunities. More resilient and diverse crops reduce the risk of crop failure, which can protect poor families from hunger and malnutrition. Second, biodiversity enhances resilience to climate change. Diverse genetic resources are key to breeding crops that can tolerate drought, heat, pests, and emerging diseases. This adaptability is vital for smallholder farmers whose livelihoods are directly affected by changing weather patterns and degraded ecosystems. This resilience is essential for sustainable agriculture, especially in poor regions most affected by climate change. Third, biodiversity conservation fosters the empowerment of local communities. In situ and on-farm conservation initiatives not only preserve traditional knowledge, but also provide farmers, especially women and indigenous peoples, with greater control over seeds, planting decisions, and innovation. This autonomy strengthens community resilience, promotes equity, and enables locally driven development. In short, conserving plant genetic resources transforms biodiversity from a passive asset into an active driver of inclusive, climate resilient, and food secure rural development. This strengthens community ownership and decision making, contributing to social and economic resilience. By increasing access to diverse planting materials and local seed systems, smallholder farmers are less dependent on external inputs and commercial seed markets. This autonomy contributes to economic stability and poverty reduction in rural settings. Smallholder family farming plays a central role in rural employment and income generation, especially in Chile, where it comprises around 80% of agricultural holdings. According to Verdeguer, specialized family farms experienced a real income increase of 80% between 2000 and 2011, driven primarily by agricultural self-employment. This demonstrates the sector's viability and potential to support upward mobility. Moreover, agriculture provides not only direct jobs but also stimulates rural economies through local food systems, processing chains, and community markets. Supporting family farming thus contributes significantly to poverty reduction and inclusive rural development. Agriculture remains one of the main sources of livelihoods in rural areas, providing both direct and indirect employment through production, transformation, and commercialization of agri-food goods. Innovation, technology, and improved practices in agriculture can increase productivity, generate added value, and open up new markets, particularly in the agri-food sector. Biodiversity conservation within smallholder farming system enhances productivity, strengthens climate resilience, and secures food access for vulnerable communities. Practices such as seed preservation, agroecology, and mixed cropping systems promote adaptation to environmental stressors while reducing reliance on external inputs. The FAO highlights that agrobiodiversity is a key element of a sustainable food system and a buffer against climate volatility. In Chile, family farmers have traditionally conserved local varieties, supporting ecosystem services and community-based seed systems that ensure autonomy and adaptability in times of crisis. Family farming is more than an economic activity. It is a socially rooted way of life that integrates cultural identity, gender inclusion, and local governance. As emphasized by Fonseca, family agriculture fosters community bonds, cultural preservation, and gender equity, particularly through the rising leadership of rural women. These systems prioritize sustainability over profit maximization and strengthen social cohesion through cooperative networks and shared environmental stewardship. In doing so, they offer a viable model for inclusive development, capable of addressing Chile's multidimensional rural challenges and restoring balance between people, productivity, and nature. Now, I'd like to share with you an inspiring applied case of agricultural innovation. This case is the development of raspberry cultivars adapted to Chilean conditions. This program, led by the Professor Marina Gambardella and colleagues of the Faculty of Agronomy and Natural Systems of our university, has significantly impacted smallholder farming in the country. Chile is among the top global exporters of frozen raspberries. However, for many years, the entire industry depended on a single variety, heritage. While it was adaptable, it didn't meet the rising market demands. This led to the creation of a breeding program in 2009. The challenges were clear. Heritage offered low yield, small fruits, and poor resistance to drought and disease. If Chile was to remain competitive, it needed new, locally adapted varieties. The program set out to boost yield and fruit quality, develop resistance to pests and diseases, and ensure the cultivars could thrive in varied conditions through primocane cane fruiting. Using classical breeding, over 30,000 seedlings were evaluated in Santo Domingo location. Selection was based on traits like fruit size, degrees breaks, yields, and stress tolerance. They also incorporated molecular tools and field trials. In 2014, the first three cultivars, Santa Teresa, Santa Clara, and Santa Catalina, were released. These cultivars doubled yields and produced larger fruits, allowing raspberry cultivation to expand. In 2023 and 24, 4 more cultivars were released. Sana Eduvina showed the highest yield at 35 tons per hectare. That is a lot. Others offered benefits such as high sugar content, disease resistance, and even suitability for mechanized harvesting. Since 2020, over 2 million plants have been sold to farmers across Chile, supporting more than 1,600 families. Targeted plant breeding has increased yields and resilience, empowering rural families and improving their livelihoods. The Chilean model has shown strong potential for scalability, while also strengthening local agricultural systems and promoting long-term sustainability. The 4 cultivars described by Professor Gambardella illustrate the role of genetic innovation in supporting small-scale growers in Chile. But most importantly, the following narratives illustrate the profound impact of this work and how truly life-changing it has been. Let us put a name and, more significantly, a face to these stories. One of the most remarkable stories is that of this woman, a member of one of Chile's most prominent indigenous groups, the Mapuche people, who began with around 300 plants beside her home to support her husband, and now runs a prosperous berry enterprise. Isabel financed her son's entire university education through her sales. He is now a biotechnology engineer. This woman used to live alone for 6 months each year, as her husband worked in the mining industry. The raspberry business she started enabled him to remain on the farm, and together they have established a successful enterprise. Now, let us turn to the key takeaways from today's session. Rural poverty demands territorial solutions. Policymakers must design strategies tailored to the multidimensional and geographic nature of rural deprivation. Investment in rural services, education, and mobility is non-negotiable for inclusive development. Protecting and using plant genetic resources is essential for food security, climate resilience, and the empowerment of smallholder communities. Smallholder family farming is a strategic driver of rural employment, food sovereignty, and cultural preservation. Public and private institutions should expand support for agroecological practices, access to markets, and community-based seed systems. Invest in research and breeding programs that strengthen crops' resilience to drought, pest, and disease, empower communities to conserve and use local varieties as tools for adaptation. Stories like Isabel's and Nery's remind us that agricultural innovation must reach those who need it most. Foster inclusive innovation ecosystems that bridge science, policy, and traditional knowledge. Replicate and adapt the raspberry cultivar program to other crops and regions. Use it as a blueprint for community-led breeding that boosts productivity, income, and rural pride. Whether you're a policymaker, researcher, student, or community leader, take action, promote biodiversity, support smallholders, and advocate for policies that connect conservation with rural prosperity. Thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation.
Hey, thank you so much, Professor Magdalena. It was really enlightening. I'll open the floor to questions from our students.
Okay.
No? Again, please.
Anyone? Okay,
Yeah,
this
please.
is a
Just-
kind of little
actually-
different perspective of poverty. I know that rural poverty has special and unique challenges. So it is a really different perspective. But
we do have
go
a
ahead.
question here. Yeah, we do have
Okay,
a
yeah,
question here.
questions.
Please.
Bu-
Okay.
Buenos días en Chile y estoy muy contento por escuchar la presentación de la alumna de Universidad Política de Madrid. Estudié en Madrid en 2009. Si no te importa, puedo hablar inglés para más información. I have one advice and one question. My advice is about a professor very famous in China named Yuan Longping. He is the father of the hybrid rice, and who gave great contributions to the anti-poverty battle for China. And that's my advice for your investigation and research. He's very famous.
Thank you.
And I'm
Thank
from
you.
the School of Public Policy in Tsinghua University. After graduation, I began to work here because our school is focusing on the policy making and policies. The Prime Minister of Spain came to China in recent days, and in the past 12 months, he came to China for 2 times. And if everything goes well, the chief of Spain will come to China again. And these circumstances occurred after Trump's policy of tariffs on different countries. And that's my question about your research and the relationship between the policies of the tariffs on China, on Chile, on Latin America, and maybe Spain, and also about what is your perspective and the forecast about the future trend of policies based on the tariffs of the agriculture products. And I noticed about your research is strongly related with engineering and economics. That's what I'm quite interested in. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much for that question. If I understand correctly, you want to know the professor's opinion about the tariffs on agriculture products. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a
thank
different
you.
topic, just to clarify that, but okay. We'll do our best.
Okay, thank you for your question. If I understood clearly your question, what I think about policies in this special perspective, rural development, what is really important is to have clearly identify problems. This is the first step, I would say. Okay, and secondly, what is really important to keep in mind is that rural policy will never succeed if there is not public and private partnership. So collaborative framework is basic to any policy of this matter that will reach those communities that are very particular in their needs. Okay, I'm not so sure about if I answered your question or your perspective.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Gracias.
I noticed, thank you. I noticed there's another question in the chat about how can we translate these topics of study into a viable project alleviation program? And I think that that's part of the challenge. That's part of the invitation that we make to all the students. Is the idea is to offer a bit of inspiration, a bit of context, a bit of background that later you guys, with all of the education that you bring and your conversations with your peers, will be able to transform into a project that meets your interests. Okay, Maria Emilia Salinas has another question.
Yes, hi, thanks for the presentation, Magdalena. My question is related of like your opinion again, like what structural or systematic barriers do you think contribute to make difficult for people that it's related in the agriculture sector to kind of get better opportunities or what you mentioned, like the food security?
Yeah, thank you. I think in agriculture sectors, is not only in smallholder situations, okay? I think that this is a industry that is really traditional, reluctant to innovation. And I think there's a gap there that is important to address, because it is not easy to come to a community and to put a solution without their will to put things like that. Okay, it is really important, the dialogue, the conversation, the needs they have, and the traditional knowledge they carried from decades, from maybe centuries in some cases. So I would say in agriculture, at least in Chile and in Latin America, I think it's the same. The traditional mentality is like a barrier, an important barrier that you have to cross to come across with solutions.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Questions for
Maribel,
Magdalena? Maria Luisa, yes?
is any other questions from our student or your student? If they don't, I would like to take the chance to ask questions, okay?
Let's see. Jump, anyone willing to jump quickly here? All right, I guess not. Go for it, Professor Tata.
Yeah, actually, it's not really a question. I would like to say that you know the Miss Madalena, right? Miss Madalena, right? Your lecture is wonderful, and your idea is wonderful. So I think maybe it is the timing. The Maribel, we should invite Madalena. Yeah, we should invite her to join our challenge program. Okay, so she could put you know, the topic as you know, towards our students, so that our student team could choose that topic, okay, and have more discussion, and invite the student from Tsinghua, invite student maybe from other Latin American country like Brazil, so that the people can getting together, trying to figure out more rich solution. You know, maybe.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's fun because the idea the idea, the solution, the basic idea of the solution is already there. So how can make that, you know, how to realize it in the reality, right?
Thanks so much.
Important.
Yeah, just to clarify, I mean, I know that we have students on our end are already working on the topics related to Magdalena's lecture, as
Wonderful.
well as Maria Luisa's lecture. And we did pass on these topics to be included in the China Latam Challenge topics option. Yeah,
That's
just to make, yeah, just one last comment. The teams are for the Chilean side have already also started. So we have pairs, students in pairs and triads already working on these topics related to as much as Magdalena's presentation as well as Maria Luisa's presentation. And of course, we're really looking forward to joining our peers over there from Tsinghua University. So that's already, yeah, we're already working along those lines.
Wonderful.
So that's
wonderful.
everyone.
Okay. So, all right.
Okay,
maybe
any
the
other
time from now-
question before we wrap up today?
Yeah. Yes or no? You want to say something? Okay.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
So, all right, well, with that, I think that we can conclude the first session for the China-Chile master classes portion of the China Latam Youth Challenge to Alleviate Poverty. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And it's been a fantastic and really insightful session. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Maribel, for your wonderful
Thank you.
motivation of this class, and thank the Professor Maria and also Professor Madalena. Yeah, your both the speech are wonderful. It's very inspiring, so that we learn a lot from it, and also we want to work on the type of topic that you suggest. Okay, looking forward to working with you and see you again, maybe in China or maybe in Chile. Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you everyone.